I met you 40 years ago. I met you on a sun-swept afternoon of horror. I've known you through a balmy tropic night of fear. I will never forget you. I suppose that through the years which have so swiftly run, at least 10,000 times I've recalled some portion of the day where our lives crossed paths. But the memories which surface in my retrospection are not of horror, not of blackness, not of fear, but of the little things. Things like honor and courage and simple honesty. Things so small and yet so great that they form the cornerstone of our society. And when I think about these things, I'm humbled by the thought that I've seen true greatness in my day. Our Adrian Marks, the pilot of the PBY Catalina, which rescued 56 Indianapolis survivors out of the water, first spoke these words in a speech entitled, "I've Seen Greatness," to you, this very same group, 35 years ago. Those words and that iconic speech have resonated in my mind ever since I was old enough to comprehend them. You see, Adrian Marks is my grandfather. I am David J. Levine, Commander, United States Navy JAG Corps Reserves, and I'm so very humbled and proud to be here to speak with you today, even if it does have to be over video. My grandfather passed away on March 7th, 1998. I was the last member of his family to see him alive, and I buried his ashes in the sky, out the window of a single-prop Cessna airplane, over the fields of his beloved Frankfort, Indiana. His very last flight. I think about him often, and I'd like to take my time today to tell you a little bit about my memories of him and of what he taught me. My first memory of him was as a young child, playing in his living room. Elta, his wife, was a fantastic artist and an adventurer, and she'd painted a gigantic mural over a whole living room wall of one of her whitewater rafting adventures. My grandfather could always be found in the same spot. He had a big upholstered chair that he'd sit in. And he loved his bacon, and he not only loved bacon, but he loved it, as he called it, still oinking. Essentially raw. It was disgusting, really. Nevertheless, that's the way he liked it. Anyway, sometimes, when all of us kids were playing on the floor, we'd gather around at his feet, and he'd tell us of the day that changed his life forever. He told me that he and his crew could hardly believe what they saw. Men in the water, hundreds of them. Sharks in the water, countless numbers. But he didn't hesitate. He did what he knew to be right. He won the consent of his crew, and he landed his Catalina in the open ocean amid 12-foot swells, risking everyone's life on that airplane. He did so knowingly defying standing orders to not ever attempt a landing out in the open ocean like that. He and his crew saw what was necessary, and they acted. Damn the risks. Damn the Navy and their rules. I sat there as a young child, and I learned that sometimes there's a gaping chasm between doing what's right and doing what's allowed. I learned that with brotherhood and honor, you can accomplish the impossible and survive through the interminable. I learned of greatness on that living room floor. I learned of your greatness on that floor. Over the years of reflection upon the story, I keep returning to that simple truth I learned on that living room floor. That sometimes, to be great, you gotta break a rule or two. Now, don't get me wrong. I just told you earlier that I was in the JAG Corps. I'm a Navy lawyer, and I wouldn't be in the Navy for very long if I regularly advised my clients to break the rules. But when we're talking about life or death, the truth is that you can't teach morals. And you can't force someone to stand by and watch as another man drowns. The brave amongst us will think for themselves and act in service to their fellow man. The timid amongst us will cite regulation to excuse their own inaction. My grandfather was not perfect, but he was most certainly one of the brave. He would tell us over and over again that the men in the water were the true heroes, which is true, but it's also true that not everyone would have conducted themselves the way my grandfather and his crew did that day. My family and I are proud of his actions. We're proud of the actions of the men in the water, and we're proud of the actions of the men on the USS Doyle who steamed to everyone's rescue. The Indianapolis may have been forgotten for 4 days, but the story of the Indianapolis will never be forgotten. It survives in each one of you listening today. It will survive in your children and your grandchildren. I carry your story everywhere I go. I keep a book about the Indianapolis on my desk, anyone who walks into my office, we can have a talk about it. Every commanding officer I've ever served under knows your story because I've told it to them. Your truth and your example survives in the Navy today. And not just from me, some desk jockey talking about stories that aren't mine. It survives in the heroism displayed by the countless men and women warriors who've come after you. Your situation may have been unique in its particular horror and its higher level follies, but the resolve to persevere endures in our fighting forces today. And I hope it brings you comfort to know there are still those anonymous souls amongst us who, when faced with the unimaginable, will conduct themselves unimaginably well. My grandfather knew this to be true as well, because he closed his speech to you 35 years ago in a similar way. He said, "I've seen greatness in my time, not that of some political leader or popular hero, but the greatness of an entire crew of a great ship. And while that crew will always be something very special to me, I know that it was drawn at random from the service members of our whole country. I have seen the greatness of America." End quote. And now, so have I. Thank you so much.